probably 4 or 5 decades of experience. We constantly strive to improve our skills and help further the hobby. We explore new equipment, new technology, and evolving techniques to maximize the health and growth of our tanks and their inhabitants. In doing so, we strive to provide honest, thorough, and unbiased reviews and feedback to our fellow aquarists and the aquarium industry. Usually, we discuss these products amongst ourselves. You know, we will hook up, once every week or two, and we'll just chit chat amongst ourselves. But today is special because we have our first guest speaker via our Zoom meetings. Today we have Jeremy Howell, who is the National Sales Manager of Brightwell. And welcome, Jeremy. We're happy that you're here. Hopefully we can all learn a lot from you. I'm sure we will. But before we get going with the meeting, I'm gonna send it over to Julio, who is going to speak about the meeting format, how this is going to be handled, to maintain some kind of organization in this. So Julio, take it over.
Hi guys, and thanks for joining us. We're going to keep it simple. Basically, Jeremy's going to be talking about 3 products tonight: Coral Amino, Restor, and Replenish. He's going to discuss how it's used, what they're for, and go over any questions that we have, any questions that you might have about any other products. Also, feel free to ask. And at the end of this, we're also going to have a raffle. We're going to have a drawing for a bucket of their salt, a bottle of their Microbacter 7, Coral Amino, and Restor. You have to be present for the online drawing so that you can see who wins, and it'll be sent to you directly from Brightwell. Any questions? If anyone has any questions, type it in. It'll go to our moderator, and we'll ask the question, and Jeremy can answer, hopefully, what you're asking about. All right, let's get started. Jeremy, are you there?
I am. Thank you guys for having me. So I guess I'll just start in with, we're talking about amino acids and trace elements. Brightwell Aquatics has a number of these different products available, and sometimes it can be daunting for most hobbyists to kind of figure out which ones that they want. So what I'd like to do is give some clarity about it, and then I'd also like to, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of biology and all that stuff, but I'm going to need to touch on some of it so that you will understand why we develop products the way that we developed them. So 2 of the products in particular are amino acids. One is Coral Amino and one is Restor. And both of those are amino acids. One is a blend of complex amino acids and free-form amino acids, and I'll get to what those are in a minute. And in Restor, and Coral Amino is just free-form amino acids. So when we're talking about amino acids, it's good to understand what they are and why they're important. And people and other companies in the industry like to use a lot of words to describe them, but I'll break it down as simply as I can. So when we look at a coral, we look at what that coral is, okay? So it's a limestone, aragonite base of coral skeleton, and on top of that coral skeleton, you have coral polyps growing on them. And within those coral polyps, if you go deeper down into what that DNA is you have proteins. And if you go further down in the chain, you have amino acids. So within these amino acids, you can have complex amino acids, which are strains of amino acids together. Those are complex amino acids. And free-form amino acids are broken down all the way to the simplest form. We have described them as already pre-digested, but that's really not a technical term. It's something that we use to describe them, just to give some simplicity of how you could think about these. So they're all the way down at the building blocks of protein. Now, when you strain these amino acids together, you get complex forms. And those complex forms are building blocks of protein. And so when you look at free form, they're already down to the basic structure of what an amino acid is, which is different molecules attached together by either nitrogen or carbon, and you have oxygen and hydrogen attached to them, but they're ready to use already. And that's coral amino. They're basically ready to go. And what we've done is we've taken scientific papers from oceanographers, marine scientists, and coral research papers, and we've identified 21 specific amino acids that are within most every coral tissue that you could find out there. So we've targeted those 21 amino acids in their free form, and we put them into coral amino. And so a coral doesn't have to break down those amino acids to use them as energy. They're available right away. They absorb them through their tissue, and they're ready to start building proteins at that point. And I like to tell people that are keeping predominantly SPS coral to use coral amino because they're probably the most readily available. If you're doing a lot of fragging, it allows the coral to lay down tissue pretty easily and heal up if there's any, trauma that's been given to that coral by fragging. So we have a lot of coral farms that use coral amino on a regular basis when they're fragging. And even in some cases, if a coral is not exhibiting the best health by the look of it, then tissue, terrible color, you can do stronger doses to, feed it what it would need for it to build more tissue and grow, basically. So that's coral amino. And if you look at Restor is, when I talked about those chains of amino acids, it has those building blocks already chained together. So you can, and it has free form in there as well. So it's a mixture of both. So I like to use Restor in a mixed reef or anything with like LPS coral, because it's a little bit heavier of a food and it is better suited for those type of corals. Now, with the chains of amino acids, the owner of our company, Jack Kent, when he started Kent Marine, he was one of the first, if not the first, aquarium manufacturers to put out an amino acid. This is back in the mid 90s, like 94, 95. And that was a complex form of amino acids. And that's what I would say probably 99% of acids that are made. Did somebody mute me? Am I unmuted? I'm good? Good. All right. Complex amino acids are predominantly what's available in our market for aquariums outside of coral amino. So Restor is like that. There are some other products that are very similar to it, like AcroPower and some of the others. And those are chains of amino acids that are already chained together, and it takes a little bit of energy from the coral to break those down and use them as building blocks, but it typically will help corals, especially a meaty coral like an elegance or euphyllia or something like that, build tissue pretty rapidly. And again, there's no solid proteins in there. Both of the products are fairly clear. One is a little bit heavier with the complex amino acids, but you don't get any particulate in with the proteins, so you don't see the actual proteins floating around. So that's basically our 2 amino acids. And again, I would use coral amino for predominantly SPS tanks because it's more readily available to them and it's suited best for them. And Restor is better at mixed reefs and LPS tanks. So should I talk about replenish now, or should I just leave it there and answer questions about amino acids?
Why don't you explain replenish as well, and then we'll start in with the questions.
Okay. So like our amino acids, we have multiple trace mineral supplements. The one that I particularly like the best is Replenish. And that one targets all the minor and some major trace minerals that are needed in biological functions, as well as helping chromoproteins and color of coral. So if you're using, why would you use Restore? Or not Restore, but Replenish? One of the reasons would be if you are running a calcium reactor and you don't do often water changes, your corals, the biological functions of the aquarium, and every organism that lives in the aquarium is using trace minerals. So you should be replenishing it. I like the Replenish because it covers all the trace minerals in seawater, as well as a few majors, but mostly minors. And every function of the tank, from protein skimming to the biological process, the corals, everything in the tank, even fish are using up the trace minerals. So it's being depleted, you should replenish it. That's the one that I like. We have one other one that's Coral Color, and that one's pretty much designed specifically for SPS corals. It has some targeted trace minerals that will highlight certain pigments, and it is more specifically for SPS users, whereas the replenishes are all in one. It's going to be used for anybody who's using a calcium reactor or like a sodium carbonate and calcium chloride 2-part. Our 2-part has trace minerals in it as well, but if you're using like a BRS 2-part, Replenish would be something good to use in conjunction with that for replenishing all those minors.
Thank you. We already have a few questions. With Replenish and Coral and Coral Color, can you combine them, or is that something you don't recommend?
I wouldn't recommend it. I would pick one and I'd use, whatever you're wanting to use. If you are wanting to highlight colors in your corals and you're an SPS dominant tank, I would use the Coral Color. If you have a mixed reef and you have a lot of LPS and zoanthids and everything else, and like I said, if you're using a calcium reactor, or if you're using like a 2-part that's just calcium chloride and bicarbonates or bicarb, I would use the Replenish.
Okay. And what about your schedule? Are you a Replenish or Coral Color? Is it something you would do manually or once a week, or would you put it on a doser? How would you recommend using them?
Well, you could get really technical with doing like an ICP test and see what you're depleting, and then dose that accordingly, and then do another ICP test and see where you're at. But our weekly schedule gives you a general idea of what you should be adding based on the average mixed reef tank. If you have wall-to-wall SPS or wall-to-wall and you can't see the rock in the tank, you probably need to up your dose a little bit. If you don't have many corals, starting at half the dose of our recommended dose is probably where you should go. And I always, even with our products, if I'm talking to consumers, I always tell them to start with half dose and bump up from there, because when we give a suggested dose, it's on the average look of an aquarium, average, stocking population and so on and so forth. And they're between you guys, I'm sure that no 2 tanks are alike. So that's how we base our general dosage.
I'm just reading from the product, the bottle itself, and it says 5 mils per 50 gallons of aquarium water at least twice a week, or up to every other day. So those are just general instructions. There's more advanced instructions. You have both kinds on the bottle itself.
Those are also another key point to our products that make us a little bit different is our products are chelated, so they're time released. So like Kat was saying, if you wanted to do it every other day, you could do that, or you could do a general dose once a week. And the chelation means it's going to be time released. So it's not going to be all those trace elements are free to all the animals immediately. Every time a coral lays down coral skeleton, there's precipitate that goes on, and those trace minerals are used. You know, when you build up calcium carbonate, it's not just a calcium and a carbonate. There's strontium in there. There's other things that go on with that precipitate that goes on. So those are things that need to be in ratio to seawater when even the coralline algae is looking to grow. So it has to be pretty equal. So that's why we chelate.
Thank you. Guys, we forgot to introduce someone. Kat Dawan is also with us. She's also from Brightwell. You saw her speak briefly there. I apologize for not introducing her before, but welcome, Kat.
Thank you, and no worries at all.
A bunch of questions that are coming in here. We have someone that wants to ask a question, Matt, which has a huge tank. Matt, are you there?
Looks like he stepped away, but I know Matt's using Replenish, and he's told me that he's had success with it. But what I told him was, Matt, how do you know if you're having success with it when you haven't done ICP testing? So I'd love to hear what Matt has to say.
Okay.
One of the things that happens that you're having success, if let's say you have a coral that's not as colorful, and you take a before and after shot. And I've done a couple of tests with some of our stores and said,
Jeremy, if you don't mind me interrupting, Matt is a very anal guy. He's a member of our club. I'd like for him to hear your response.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where he went. So what's the other question, Julio?
Well, there's a few questions that have come on. Give me 1 second. Let me see. Someone's asking about overdosing, and can you overdose? And if you overdose, what are the repercussions?
With regards to
any of the three products that you're discussing.
Well, with anything, so like an amino acid, if you're giving an amino acid, right, it has carbon and it has nitrogen in it. Zooxanthellae are going to use the nitrogen in photosynthesis, that carbon as well to in photosynthesis when they're making up sugars. So most of, especially in coral amino, it's really hard to overdose that product. You can, and I think the signs would be, noticing that the glass is a little bit hazier than it normally is would be a sign of overdosing. You're not going to overdose coral amino and have death or anything like that. Restore, same way. Restore would probably happen a lot quicker because it's more complex amino acids than freeform, so it's heavier and it's going to have noticeable signs of nutrient in the tank available to other organisms beside the coral if you're overfeeding. And with regards to replenish, because it's chelated, there's no harm to overdosing it at all. So you just have elevated, trace mineral,
Okay.
which isn't going to harm anything. It's not going to hurt any corals. Most of it would probably be, precipitated out if it's too elevated, for example.
Julio, you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Julio.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize that. Someone just asked a question in regards to Replenish and how it compares to Red Sea A and B.
Well, Replenish is a trace mineral, and so it's minor and major trace minerals. A and B, from what I understand, and I really don't like talking about other people's products, but that's a mix of food with vitamins. So I don't believe there's much trace mineral in that at all. So it would be similar to like complex amino acids, where they are chains of amino acids already strung together in with some vitamins attached to it. That's why you get the green color in it. If it's not a food dye, it's probably because of the B vitamins that are in there.
Someone else just asked a question that they have limited space in their dosing, and they're asking if they could combine the products and dose it together.
Replenish and like restore. Julio, you were muted.
I believe he said yes.
Okay. You could. So another thing that makes our products different than other products that are on the market, and one of the ones that you just mentioned, was the fact that anything that we make is going to be properly preserved. We won't make anything that requires refrigeration. Okay. So when we make, like, let's say our amino acids, we properly preserve them so that they have a shelf life and you don't need to refrigerate them. So you can put them in a doser and there'll be no problem. You won't grow any funky, mold spores or anything like that by leaving it open. There are others that can preserve stuff, but I don't believe that the ones that say that you need to refrigerate it, the reason why is because they don't know how to properly preserve the amino acids and vitamins so that they can withstand being outside the refrigeration. So that's number one. You could add Restore and our amino acids, but Replenish. But Replenish is a once a week kind of dose. So you don't really need to put it in a doser unless you have a very large aquarium. And even then, if you had a very large aquarium, you could just do the recommended, dosage like once a week. And it would, because they're chelated, they're going to be time released. They're not all going to be available right away. So it's going to be over time administered to the aquarium in the water column.
Would you recommend turning off your skimmer when you do dose any of the aminos?
Absolutely, for sure. The longer you give the corals time to absorb that amino acid, the better. Because amino acids are building blocks of protein, your protein skimmer removes them. I don't care what you say on your packaging. If you want to say like, oh, well, they can withstand being in the tank longer. I don't know how they're claiming that, but for us, if you could when you're feeding, if you could turn your tank off or just have the tank recirculating water, the better. And, if you can leave off your tank for 30 minutes, leave it off for 30 minutes. The longer you give the corals time to absorb that nutrition, the better off it is for the corals.
What would you recommend the best time of day to feed? During the day, after the lights have been on, with the lights off? What have you noticed, or what have you found to be the best time?
Most of the corals use a lot of energy at night in their feeding. So early in the morning before the lights come on is when I typically would suggest to people dosing a nutrition. So whether it be an amino acid or actually spot feeding your corals, it's right before they're gonna get all that light and they're gonna metabolize all that nutrition that they've been capturing all night. So early in the morning, right before the lights come on, is what I suggest.
Okay. Your instructions on some of the bottles, and I'm trying to read what they wrote here, is you have different dosages or What is the easiest way for someone to dose their tanks if they have a predominantly SPS tank? What do you recommend, or how would you dose?
So there's two different philosophies in feeding, and we address them both on our packaging. One is target feeding, and one is a broadcast food. Broadcast food is, a way that a lot of people feed their tank, and they just dump the nutrition into the tank, and the corals capture whatever prey they can get out of the water column. That's one way of doing it. I like spot feeding. So if I had a coral exhibiting like a little bit of recession and it was receding a little bit, and I wanted to give that coral some extra nutrition, I'd try to stop all the water movement around that coral, and I'd try to spot feed it if I could. If I have large polyp stony corals, and I'm feeding it whole proteins like mysis or any of the foods that we have, like reef blizzard or anything like that, what I would do is I'd turn off all the flow and I would target that coral by itself. You could broadcast feed the tank. It just creates a little bit more of challenges when it comes to managing nutrient. But a lot of people have good skimmers these days. They have good ways of exporting that nutrition. And a lot of people have situations where they don't have enough nutrition in the tank. They have zero registered phosphate and nitrate on the aquarium. So, that's not a problem for them. Those are people that broadcast feeding would address. I particularly like spot feeding.
Great, thank you. We have Matt. He's back and he wanted to ask a question. Matt, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. There was an emergency. A friend's return pump died, so I happen to have an extra one, so I gave it to him. I had a question, which you kind of answered earlier on the trace elements with the replenish. It's dosing a slurry of everything. And then you said you could use an ICP to test different things. Does Brightwell have an individual line of each individual element so that, like, if you're low on certain ones, you can target those certain elements and bring them up?
No, we don't. So the way that it happens, either by biological systems in the aquarium, most corals will take natural seawater has a certain amount of trace minerals in it, and they're, definite. There's not a variance in there. So what we try to do is we try to replicate seawater with the trace minerals so that as corals are using them up, they're using them in the same ratios that they would in seawater. So you shouldn't have an abundance of, let's say, vanadium versus cobalt. You shouldn't have that because corals are using them in relationship to one another. Checking on an ICP is probably a good idea, but typically you're not going to find when using Restor that you're going to have one depleted element outside of the norm.
I've been using the replenish, not the Restor.
Or replenish, I'm sorry.
Okay. And then, but if one is a little bit lower, it's okay, even though you can target it with that, is it okay to continue your normal dosage with the replenish?
Yeah, and you should be able to correct that by water changes. You shouldn't have to target one specific trace mineral.
I have a big SPS dominated system, about 1,200 gallons, and I haven't done regular water changes in over 6 years.
Okay.
So it's a little tricky on the water change. I may get back into that, but I haven't. And I was just curious, on bringing up certain element.
How, out of curiosity, what's low?
Iodine runs a little low. Potassium runs a little low, and those are normal things that are, just getting used up. But everything else, is in the green on there. Some a little bit lower in the green than others. And I was just wondering on those ones that were a little bit lower in the green, does it really matter as long as they're in the green?
No, as long as they're in the green, you should be fine. If you're not doing normal water changes, it gets kind of a little bit trickier. But with normal using replenish, you're gonna replace all those minor minerals. The two that you highlighted, potassium and iodine, we do have specific trace minerals for those. We have 3 different iodine treatments.
I just ordered your iodine.
Yeah, so Lugal's being my favorite because it's like the gold standard. It's been around for a long time. That's the one that I like using. And potassium, we make it in a liquid form and a dry. So, and on our instructions, we give you exact dosage to increase measurements. So 1 teaspoon per gallon will get you X bump in potassium. So, but as far as like what you were talking about with minor trace minerals, which are way down in the you know, parts per billion, you probably aren't going to get something like I said, like cobalt or vanadium, way off, because corals are just, everything in the biological system is going to use it relative to seawater. So it's pretty specific in how they use those particular elements. Something like a major mineral like calcium, strontium, potassium, magnesium, all those things are, that's a whole different conversation, because laying down calcium carbonate takes a lot more of those major carbonates than the minor trace minerals.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mine was kind of like a two-part question. If they don't mind if I ask the other question, is that okay?
Go ahead, Matt.
My other question was with the aminos. Let's say you stop dosing aminos. Is there a certain period of time before you see the effects of that? For instance, my case, I was using an amino, and I quit using an aminos about 3 months. Corals have never looked better. Is there like a carryover where they're still present from what you were dosing, or are they getting things naturally from what you were just doing anyway?
Well, okay, so aminos are just the building blocks of protein, but if you're putting food in your aquarium, frozen food, a particulate food to feed the corals, if you're putting any kind of nutrition into the tank, through those proteins being broken down, you are essentially putting amino acids in the aquarium still. So you're still feeding your corals. The corals are still getting food. So what happened? So coral nutrition in the last couple of years has taken a really fun leap. For me, anyways, the way that the conversations evolved. You know, back in the mid '90s and early 2000s, people were trying to get rid of phosphate and nitrate, and they were deathly afraid of putting anything in the aquarium because they couldn't manage the nutrient that came with adding food to the tank. So they didn't feed. And now the opposite is happening with, you know, Chaeto reactors, algae scrubbers, all those things added to our hobby lately. It seems like coral nutrition is more important than ever. So, you know, we make a particulate food in Reef Blizzard, and we break that down by size based on what mouth particle size the particular coral has for eating. And we suggest soaking those proteins in amino acids just to give more nutrition to the coral. You know,
I was going to make the switch over to Brightwell from what I was using, and I want to kind of I wanted to have a really good data look at the corals to know when I was totally off of one and then on to the other. So I wanted to give some time in between so that I kind of knew that my effects weren't just a carryover from what I was using, so I could maybe see if there were differences.
Yeah, so to not have an analytical or anecdotal reading, I would always say to look at the aquarium, mark all the elements on the, test all your aquarium water, know where you're at. If you're going to start something, take a picture of it so you know what the tank looks like at the moment you changed, and then wait however long and take another picture of it, and then make the determination. If you're looking at something every day, it's going to be really hard for you to make the anything outside of anecdotal that is going to be registerable. So I'll give you an example. I had one of our customers kind of challenge me and say, will amino acids really color up coral? And I said, as long as you're feeding any nutrition to a coral, you're going to color up the coral and it's going to get healthier. And so I told them what they needed to do was take a picture of it, dose that and nothing else for 90 days and then take another picture. And then you tell me if it worked. And it was so overwhelming that they could not believe it. Like, and now they're a proponent and they always talk about our coral aminos because of, you know, the camera doesn't lie, you know, especially if you take it the same time of day under the same lighting from the same distance away, you're going to see what the effects of feeding or not feeding is going to do to that coral.
Thank you.
One other question, and then I'm gonna let someone else ask. I was asked if I'm dosing replenish already, but my tank is primarily SPS. If I start adding coral color as well, will that do anything? Will I see a difference? Am I dosing doubling up on the same type of product, or what should I do? That was
so Coral Amino and Restor are amino acids and their nutrition. Coral Color and Replenish are trace minerals. They work together, but they're not the same. So in one regard, you're talking about Restor feeding your corals, giving it nutrition, giving it protein. And in the other one, you're talking about trace mineral supplementation that's going to help you color up corals, replenish minor minerals and some majors that are missing through biological processes. So they're two completely different, and them being dosed together is not going to affect the other.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Frank Landrio is with us tonight, and he also had a question he wanted to ask. Frank, are you there?
Hear me?
We can hear you.
So I've got basically a 35 nano, nothing major, all LPS, not ready for SPS yet. I'm the one that was using, I asked about the Red Sea A and B. I'm using that now. I was told that the Brightwell is a great product. I want to try it, just not sure which one that I would use.
Okay, so are you talking about the brand new Red Sea product that came out, or the old?
The brand new one.
The brand new one. Okay, so we look at this a little bit differently than Red Sea does, and I don't want to speak for them, but I'll just tell you from our standpoint, we want you to add vitamins if you're wanting to add vitamins. We're wanting you to add amino acids if you're wanting to add amino acids. We're not trying to make an all-in-one, all-encompassing, my magic pill fits everybody who's listening to this video in one shot. So in your particular situation, having predominantly LPS corals in a 35-gallon nano tank, I would say that Coral Restor would be, or the Restor product would be what you should use if you're wanting to switch from one amino acid to another. The Red Sea A and B is not apples to apples to our product. It's a whole different way of looking at nutrition. So, and I think that you'll have good results with ours if you're using that product. It's not going to turn your tank green, and it doesn't have vitamins in it, but you know, it will feed your coral. And you know, I'd even like to recommend that you try our Reef Blizzard foods with that. I think that our Reef Blizzard L would work really good for you, and soaking those foods in the Restor and target feeding your LPS coral, whether you have, you know, Scully's or Euphilia, you're going to see excellent results by doing that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to give a shout out to a few people. Peter from Reef News Network is here. Devin, Reef Dudes, is here. And I want to say hi to Philip. Philip is a long-term user or very fond user of Coral Amino. He's always posting about it. So Philip, if you want to tell us a little bit about your experience with Coral Amino.
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was using Acro Power for the longest time, and then I started dabbling around with the Coral Amino. I was using several other Brightwell products, the Neo Marine, the potassium, and the iodine. So I decided to give the Coral Amino a try. I started using it for about a year now, since Reefapalooza Anaheim, and I'm using it daily, and I've just seen a night and day difference in my coral, especially with my SPS. They're growing, I wouldn't say twice as fast, but they're growing a lot faster than they were before. And the colors that are coming out of them are about the best I could ever hope for. So I'm really happy with the product. I tuned in mainly tonight because I just started using the Restore and the Replenish. And my concern was the same as some of the others have suggested. I wasn't sure if I would be overdosing using the Replenish. Normally I have to, once a week, I have to dose potassium and the Lugol's iodine to keep everything level with my ICP testing. So that was my biggest reason for tuning in, to see if by adding the Replenish, if I would be adding like too much potassium or too much iodine with my regular dose.
No. In fact, I think that with regards to Replenish, you'll find that I would say, like I gave the last guy a recommendation of taking a picture of your coral. And by the way, Philip, your tank is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I see you posting all the time in the Ask Real Reefers forum, and like, I'm a fan of your tank. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Good job on your husbandry. You have an amazing looking aquarium. I don't think that you're gonna find that you're overdosing one particular thing, because like I said, with Replenish, it's mirroring what the corals and the biological functions of the aquarium are taking up at the same time. So they're in proper ratios. So as your corals are taking up these minor minerals like iron and some of the other, minor trace minerals, and you're doing water changes from what I've been led to believe by following your posts. So you're probably, keeping your trace mineral levels pretty stable by doing that. So with them being chelated, you don't run the risk of having something come out too high, and definitely having all those trace minerals available at all times for your corals.
Great, thank you.
The other thing too is that by switching, because you said your tank is predominantly SPS and you were using Acro Power, and I think that Acro Power and Restor are pretty similar in the fact that they're complex amino acids. Restor has free-form amino acids, so it has some of the coral amino in there, but what you're doing, especially for an SPS tank, is you're not requiring that coral to use any metabolism to break down those amino acids and the chain, so if you look at a chain link, each link is an amino acid, if you will, okay, just for a visual. So when you have a complex amino acid, it's like a link of chain, all connected together. Coral Restore is each individual link by itself, not linked up, so the coral can use that to build protein and put on tissue. So if you're growing coral faster, it makes more sense because SPS coral are taking in those individual amino acids, and we targeted 21 different amino acids based on scientific data from oceanographers, marine scientists, that basically have told us what the DNA of a coral cell is. And so we're adding that identical mix at the proper ratios so that corals can just take it and build the link themselves. They don't have to break it down to rebuild it. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
One question, and then I want to let Devin ask something. But someone just asked, I'm not sure if we touched on it already, but can coral amino cause hair algae? And then I want to pass it over to Devin so he can ask you guys some things.
Coral amino, any nutrition that you can put in the tank can obviously add, can add to your available nutrient for algae to grow. Yes. But like I said, in relationship to coral amino specifically, because they're broken down amino acids, they're free form, the chances of you get an algae bloom by using coral amino is very small. You'd have to use a lot of it, because each individual amino acid, if you look at it from the different molecules and atoms that represent that amino acid, they always have a nitrogen and they're always going to have a carbon attached to them. So it's nutrition, it's organic. That's how the coral builds tissue. So yes, I would be a liar if I said, oh no, just go ahead, dose as much as you want. It's not gonna, put any additional nutrition in your aquarium. No, that's exactly what you're doing. You're feeding your tank. But the corals and the zooxanthellae are gonna use that nitrogen and that carbon a lot quicker than the algae in your aquarium.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Devin, are you there?
I am.
Oh.
Perfect. So I have a question. For those of us using calcium reactors in terms of like aminos, trace elements, what are the best kind of product lines or supplements to complement a calcium reactor and kind of fill in the gaps of what it's not providing?
So I touched on this earlier. Good question, Devin. I would say that the Replenish is going to add all the minor minerals that you're missing in a calcium reactor. I think that you do get some addition of minor minerals when you break down calcium carbonate in a reactor. But I don't know how available that is because it could come off as precipitate, right? Like, the dust in the bottom of your calcium reactor that could hold a lot of the trace mineral, Are you getting some? Yes. But if you look at maybe ICP testing your tank, and if you know that, you're on the borderline, you're yellow on all the minor minerals like cobalt, vanadium, zinc, all those things, the addition of something like Replenish is just going to help you keep up with that calcium reactor.
Okay.
Definitely if you're using a 2-part that's specifically just sodium carbonate or sodium bicarb and calcium, this is a great addition for you because it's going to give you all that minor and some majors that you're missing that 2-part does not offer.
Okay, perfect. I guess I'll try the Replenish. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks, Devin. Richard wants to ask a question before you start to wrap things up. Richard, are you there?
Yes, sir. All right, Jeremy. As far as the coral amino and a Restor, dosing it as a combined mixture or dosing it separately, which is the best way to do it, or does it make a difference?
So again, coral amino is free form amino acids. It's not that chain link that I was talking about. All those complex amino acids aren't linked together. With regards to Restor has that link and it has the free form in there. So it's both. That's why I suggest for a mixed reef tank, obviously it has LPS in it, would benefit from having some of those complex amino acids in there. And it does have the free form amino acid in there. So Restor, if you have a mixed reef tank, is the way to go because it has both forms of amino acids. If you want to call them carbohydrates, amino acids, fatty acids, all those things, all those links are in that product, right? Whereas coral amino is specifically just free form, individual links in relationship to what the DNA has told us from coral tissue and what they require for building blocks of protein.
Okay, I got you.
Does that make sense?
I got you.
Tell me because I kind of want to make it as simple as possible, and I'm trying not to go crazy on biology.
Because I mean, the reason I ask is because I've heard a discussion that combining both, you get the best of everything, rather than using one versus the other.
We agree. That's why Restore has both complex and free-form amino acids in there. So Restore is the all-in-one shot, if you will.
Okay.
Not going too crazy like we were talking about other people's products today, but like adding vitamins and other things in there, lipids. But as far as amino acids, it has complex amino acids and it has free-form amino acids in it in Restore.
So it sounds like Restor is a more all-rounded product than Coral Aminos.
Yes.
Okay. I got you.
And that's why I suggest Coral Amino for specifically SPS dominated tanks, or if you're cutting corals often and you're needing them to regenerate tissue pretty quickly, but you're not wanting to overfeed your tank, Coral Amino is probably the best product. If you have a big meaty coral like an elegance or Euphilia or something of that nature, you're probably not wanting it. First of all, it's nutritional requirements of, let's say, a Scully versus a an SPS. Their nutritional requirements are different, right? One eats very little, one eats massive amounts of food. So we give you a heavier product in the Restore for those mixed reef tanks. And in the SPS world, we give you the Coral Amino for SPS tanks,
So like in my case, I have heavy SPS and I have heavy LPS as well on the bottom.
Mixed reef.
So that's,
I would say Restore. Restore
okay.
Because it has both.
Okay. That answers the question.
Okay.
We have two questions, one from Eddie Solar, and then Chris Kanata also wanted to ask something.
All right. Thank you, guys. Going back to what Richard was just asking about mixing Restore with Coral Amino, I've been mixing it 50-50. But now that I hear you speaking, Jeremy, okay, so let's say we mix it 50-50. How do we dose it? What's the correct dose? So do we follow the dose of Coral Amino, or do we follow the dose of Restore?
So you guys challenged me at the very beginning when you said that our instructions had different dosing instructions on there. So in each one of those scenarios, we have a target feed and a broadcast feeding dose, okay? So if you're mixing Coral Amino and Restore, what I would say is you could, and this goes against me trying to sell you more product, get rid of the Coral Amino and just double dose your Restore, because you're getting the free-form amino acids that are already in the Coral Amino are already in Restore, and you're getting the complex amino acids that the Restore has that the Coral Aminos doesn't have.
So you're saying don't dose Coral Amino at all? My tank is also a dominant SPS.
Just up your dose.
Of what?
Restore.
And no Coral Amino.
No. So Restore has free-form amino acids in there. Coral Amino is only free-form amino acids. They're the building blocks of protein, okay? Restore has both in it. It has complex amino acids and it has free-form amino acids. So by combining, you're adding more free-form amino acids to the amino acid complex in Restore, which is fine, but you could accomplish that same thing by just upping your dose on the Restore, because it would be like saying like you're adding calcium, so you're going to add, let's say, like calcium chloride, but then you're going to put 2-part in there. You're just double dosing the same thing.
So there's no sense in mixing Restore and Coral Amino then?
No, because Restore has both.
Jeremy, what you're saying is that Restore has the exact same mix of aminos that Coral Amino has, with that carbohydrate blend together with it.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it doesn't have as much as if you were to mix 50-50, like you're adding a bunch of free-form amino acids to Restore basically, and making it a supercharged amino acid.
But what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that you could accomplish the same thing with one product. And I'm probably going against every single sales technique that there ever was, which is telling you to stop buying one of my products. You could probably get away with just dosing more of the or the Restore product instead of
in essence, Jeremy, if you say the Restore's got like a 50-50 blend and amino is 100%, you know, if you're full SPS and you say that the amino is better, a mix of the both might give you a more favorable, maybe 25% carbohydrate, you know, and still 75% amino for your SPS coral. So, I mean, there could be some benefit to mixing the both.
Could be, or you could just dose more Restore and you're still going to get everything that you're getting anyways from it.
But if you're a dominant SPS with just some LPS, you know, if you increase the Restore, you're going to be increasing the carbohydrate, you know, which maybe, you know, it might lead to an overdose if you don't have as much LPS consuming, you know, that large amount of carbohydrate.
For sure, something to take into consideration.
Okay, so there could be some benefit to mixing them.
Yeah.
Well, that's what a good group. That's what a good part of our group is doing, Jeremy, is mixing Restore and CoralAmino.
Yeah.
So you know, you see this little group of people. A lot of us here are mixing Restore and CoralAmino.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are doing that, and I could tell you from the development process the way that we think when we came out with Restore and CoralAmino. The reason why we separated them is because we typically saw people that had mixed reefs have a certain nutritional demand, and people that had wall-to-wall SPS had a completely different demand. So what we tried to do is make two products that targeted those two specific customers. Because if you are wall-to-wall SPS coral, you probably don't want to add as much nutrition as you're going to get with Restore. But if you're a mixed reef customer, you're probably going to get everything that you need with the Restore. We didn't want to have people have to add 2 of our amino acids because we didn't want to make a product with both of them in it. You see what I'm saying? We tried to look at this from a perspective of, we don't want you to have to add 2 products together, 2 different amino acids, because we didn't want to put them together. There was no reason why we couldn't put them together. So we put them together, and that targeted mixed reef users with LPS, SPS, zoanthids, soft corals, and that's Restore. SPS users are a whole different group on their own, and that product is CoralAmino because normally they're cutting on them, you know, all the time, and they're needing to regenerate tissue, and they don't metabolize the same way as like an LPS coral does. So just giving you the background of why we do what we do. You know?
Great, thank you.
The benefit for blending them is that you can kind of tailor your tailor your mix to what your reef demands are.
Yeah.
Chris, one last question. Are you there? I'm here.
All right, so kind of to touch on, it's a 2-part question. When we met at MACNA, my SPS were pretty stressed, and you recommended amino because it's free-formed amino acids that are in, you know, the most simple form, so that the corals don't really have to work as hard to uptake them and use them. Is that, you know, do you recommend the aminos for more of a stress tank? And then the second part of my question is, so basically you pick a food, whether it be amino or Restore, and the best practice would be to mix it with Replenish, and this way you're getting a food and nutrients and you know, trace and stuff.
Yeah, so if you have a stressed coral that's exhibiting like RTN or STN, it's not relating to poor water quality or a pest, right? It's typically like a nutritional problem. So and I don't remember specifically the conversation that we had, but what I would tell somebody in that situation is if you give them the nutrition that they need, and like, for example, like if I'm sick and I'm in the hospital, I probably don't, they give me an IV because I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry, you know, I'm stressed out, you know. Same thing with the coral aminos. It's broken down amino acids so that they could absorb those amino acids into their skin or tissue and start building protein and using that amino acid as energy, right? So that's probably why I suggested it to you that way. And from my own perspective, I always like to target feed corals. So what I would do is I would take an amino acid, Restor or Coral Amino, and I would mix it with a particulate food, like our reef blizzard. And I would pick that food based on the particle size of that coral. Like if it's an SPS, we have a formula base for SPS corals based on their mouth size. If it's an LPS, I'd pick it for an LPS. If it's a zoanthid, I'd pick it for a zoanthid. So they all have different mouth particle size for capturing prey. I would mix that prey up. In this particular situation, it would be reef blizzard, and I would mix it with an amino acid. I would shut off all the pumps, and I would target feed that coral. And that's the way that you're going to get that coral to consume that food through its mouth, through prey practices, the best way. So, and you can broadcast feed, and I know a lot of people that have good results with broadcast feeding, and there's nothing wrong with it. My particular scenario, what I like to do is I always like to target feed. And when you turn the pumps back on, you're going to get some of that food blowing around. So there's going to be some broadcast feeding going on anyways. But if you put the specific food in front of the coral and they're able to capture it, you're guaranteed that that coral is getting the nutrition that you're trying to feed it. And that's my philosophy when it comes to that. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Please write them in the chat or send them to one of the hosts. Otherwise, we're going to get ready for the raffle. And, Jeremy, thank you so much. Kat, thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Answered a lot of questions and you cleared things up for a lot of people here. I don't see any other questions. So it looks like we're going to move on to Chris and Lulio so we can do the raffle and see who won. Obviously, any of us in Miami Reef Keepers, if our number's pulled, we're going to pull another number because we're not participating. So it's for you guys that are joining us tonight. Lulio, Chris, you guys there?
Yep. Another thing, you have to be present to win, obviously. So if you're here, you're present, but we'll give them time to answer and we'll go from there. So basically we have a list with everybody's name that's registered and it just goes, we have 26 right now, 1 through 26. I'm gonna just pull a random number off Google random number generator and we'll ask them if they're here, and if they respond, we have a winner. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet, Chris. I can't see your screen.
All right, hold on here.
Answer the spotlight.
Yeah, there we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Everyone sees the Google random number generator.
Chris,
Yes.
I think.
Okay, so basically we're gonna roll and then I will switch to the list. Ready? There you go. 14. Dan, if I butcher your name, I'm sorry. Moynihan. Number 14, Dan Moynihan.
No.
He's not here. Okay, let's go again. 21, Richard Connolly. Is he here?
Nope. No, he's not here.
No, he's not here.
Okay, next one. 17, Daniel Vo.
Nope, he's not here.
Okay, number 2, Frank Landrio.
Yes, he's here.
Okay, we have a winner.
Frank, congratulations, Frank.
He's muted.
Is he muted? Well, unmute him.
I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you, congratulations,
guys.
Frank.
I appreciate it. I've been wanting to try the product, so definitely a nice blessing. I appreciate you guys.
All right, we're gonna, one of the moderators is gonna message you and get your information, and that's pretty much it.
All right,
Awesome,
then.
guys. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank you, guys.
Jeremy and Kat, thank you very much for your hospitality.
Thanks
We
for
appreciate
sharing
you
the,
guys.
thanks for sharing the wonderful knowledge.
Yes, thank you guys. It cleared up a lot of things. Appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very good. I appreciate it. Sure learned a lot.
We'll probably try and do this again. I think maybe next time we can. I know a lot of questions were about Microbacter 7, but that's a whole different topic, I think. So
Yeah,
maybe we can.
I think that, you know, I'd be willing to come back anytime you guys need me to clear up any misinformation or just give better product understanding from our perspective.
Three of our members are starting tanks in the 300 plus size, so we're three of us are really interested in that conversation. So,
well, I will say this: like any of the three of you guys that are starting up the 300-gallon plus tanks, I will give the starting bacteria to get you guys cycled. So I will give. We make a product. It's the Reef Starter Kit, Dry Rock Starter Kit. It comes with a bottle of Quick Cycle, which is our ammonia source. It comes with a bottle of Microbacter Start, which is our nitrifying bacteria. And then it comes with a bottle for maintenance after you're done with that cycle of the Microbacter Clean, which is going to keep the tank hopefully clean throughout the ugly stage. So any of the guys that are starting up big tanks will help you cycle the tank. Just get in contact with either myself or Kat, and we'd be more than happy to help you guys.
sure, that'll be wonderful and greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, while he's on here, we would love to do something with Devin one day. So when your schedule is clear, I'll definitely send you a message.
All right, sounds good. Let me know.
All right.
Frank, I just want to make sure you got my private message before we end this.
He's muted.
Yes, I did. I have everything, Chris.
All right, just send me that email. We'll get you squared away, buddy.
Will do.
Thank you.
All right, enjoy your evening, gentlemen.
All right, guys. Thank you.
And lady.
For joining.
And
Thanks,
lady,
Kat.
yes, Kat.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care.